And time for the hot tag, which means that it's Bart Keeler coming in for the tail end of hour number 2, where we're discussing what is going on with the national team, the youth national team, reffing down here where apparently Joe Dickerson is in the middle for Atlanta and Cincinnati, as that has been released. Yeah, basically, yes. Yeah, that was the response, is the way it should have been. And
there are worse referees in MLS. I know that people get shocked to hear that, but there are worse referees than Joe Dickerson.
Oh, that's kind of cutting it close, though. But what I wanted to do to start this particular segment with you is, and I want to include Nick in this as well, obviously, the retirement of Michael Bradley. Retiring from play, and he's hanging it up from Toronto, which has been a dumpster fire, and we know that that's insulting to dumpsters with what's been going on in Toronto FC. But if you could, sir, the legacy of Michael Bradley when it comes to American soccer, what do you think?
Well, let's start with the negative, because the unfortunate legacy that he has left is that he captained the team that did not qualify for the 2018 World Cup. And unfortunately, that is something that is going to shadow over Josie Altidore, and others on that team. That said, the reason it's a shadow is because they had an otherwise great career. And Michael Bradley he went to Europe at a time when we were it was not a thing for an American soccer player to go to Europe if you weren't already having a European passport. Obviously, he had the benefit of his father being an MLS coach. Let's not pretend like that wasn't a benefit, but he used that to his advantage and became a great defensive, holding, whatever type of midfielder you want to call that. He had a great career in Europe, but he came back to MLS because he was offered basically 6 times the amount of money he was going to make in Roma. And probably at that point, Roma was actually, the Italian league still had money, I guess. So his checks were clearing, but he came back home for a lot more money, and it's hard to argue with him. And I think a lot of people also detract him for that, because he did come back to MLS probably earlier than we would have liked him to.
Yeah.
But he was a guy who kind of set the standard of what a U.S. soccer player can do in Europe at a time when, that standard bearer was Trundolo, who was just available. That was his contribution, is he was a hard worker and available in Germany. And I think to a lot of ways, Michael Bradley helped show younger generations and younger players that you can go to Europe as a slightly more creative player as an American, still with the work rate, but a more attacking and creative mind, and be successful.
So, Nick, when I mention Michael Bradley, what comes to mind?
I mean, he will be remembered well in Verona. In Roma, he had his infamous Lex Luthor goal moment, which is still one of the greatest calls in Serie A history, in my opinion. Hearing a bunch of crazy Italians go, Lex Luthor, Lex Luthor, after he scored. Yeah, that's beautiful. But the World Cup miss, I think, is it's a stain on his legacy. Booing him was really fun. It was really enjoyable. But I will say that one thing that always shocked me was after after Trinidad, when Bradley would go anywhere and he and Altidore would just get booed out of the building.
Yeah.
The Toronto FC supporters would just dive online and be like, this guy's like your captain. Like, what in God's name is wrong with you? We would kill to have a guy like that on the Canadian national team. And, he's our captain. We love him and he'll have our support. And we're like, great, keep him. He's all yours. Yeah. And
well, remember, Nick, at that point, Canada, a World Cup for Canada was a pipe dream.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. And so Bradley, I think, is somebody who, Bart nailed it. He was someone who, when he went to Europe, it was, all right, this guy's different. He's not some kind of like suave superstar. He is a workman, but he's a blue collar worker who is just grinding away. He's not just available, which I think is the perfect analogy for Cherundolo, but he's somebody who teams want and fan bases can get behind because of his work rate. And when he came back to MLS, I think there was sort of a collective of, oh, Jesus, again? Just like we had with Landon Donovan, when Donovan goes and comes back because he's homesick. Hey, look, man, nothing wrong with that. If you've never been legitimately homesick, don't talk to me about it because you don't understand. But it felt like a bit of deja vu again, where our best can't survive over in Europe because we're not mentally strong enough to do it. And so when you had that, he came back to MLS because he was not and again, this is just the label, okay, that he was not mentally strong enough to survive in Europe. He was getting paid a metric ton more cash to come here. That can't be shoved to the side, but people make their judgments no matter what. Not mentally strong enough to survive in Europe, not mentally strong enough to captain the team through to the World Cup. The comments afterwards where he did his, steady approach, which is like, hey, yeah, we're not happy about this. We're disappointed and we are just going to work and get better. That's not the time for the baseball response. That was the time for unbridled fury.
Yeah. And
I think if he had done that post-game presser in Trinidad with tears in his eyes, snot bubbles, like the Tim Tebow, we are going to be better for this and we will slaughter anyone in our way. Had he cut a wrestling promo after that, I think his legacy would be viewed very differently, but it came across as indifferent. And when that happened, it was forever stained. And to that note though, it's time. It's time for him to go. Good for him. He had a great career going to coaching.
Absolutely.
Join the U.S. men's national team, coaching staff, and put yourself in line to be what should be a hell of a manager. But I've never had any kind of crazy love for Bradley. Good for him. He's a workman. Wish him the best, but I enjoyed booing the hell out of him, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Nick, to your point, it's not so much that the biggest catastrophe was not qualifying, but it was the response from Bradley and others where it was just like, well, yeah, we didn't do it, and I guess we got to do better next time. It's like, there's not a next time.
Yes.
4 years of this, and I think that was the response. Like, and I know people heard that from Bruce Arena. Obviously, Bruce Arena as a coach is trying to save his job from not his job then, but his reputation.
Right.
But the thing is Bradley and all those guys were part of the entire campaign who, despite what I will say about Jurgen Klinsmann, and there are some people on US Soccer Twitter who, after losing to Germany 3-1, think that the answer is bring back Jurgen Klinsmann. Never the answer. But, Klinsmann struggled to even get to the final round of qualifying. But Michael Bradley and others were still part of that. And so as much as we want to blame Klinsmann, these guys were also underperforming every step because, look, the reality is the U.S. had no right missing out on that World Cup, No. And this wasn't even, to the point like with Italy, right? Like, okay, you finish second in your group, you have to go to a play. Like, those things are set up to cause a little bit of chaos. That's not how it should be in CONCACAF. Your top 6 made it, right? Or, your top 3 made it. You should not have been in that position where you didn't even qualify automatically. You didn't even make the play. Like, that should not have been a problem for you. There's no reason why for the U.S. in 2018 to have not been better than everyone but Mexico and maybe Costa Rica. And so, absolutely, Nick, they did not want to accept the fact that what happened was catastrophic.
Mm-hmm.
And they can reason it away like, oh, well, we just lost in Trinidad. What is that? And it's like, one, we haven't done that in forever.
Yeah.
Two, this loss is not just a, hey, we'll come back stronger next time. It's we're done. And again, it's really hard to divorce Michael Bradley, the captain of that team, from that failure, especially when you look into in totality, a team that lost at home to Mexico for the first time in ages, a team that lost in Costa Rica 4-0, and then a team that, again, lost to Costa Rica at home with the new manager 2-0, and then went on the road and lost to Trinidad. You lost 4 times in that qualifying cycle.
Oh.
2 at home.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, and so that is failure. And as the unfortunate reality is, though he played in multiple World Cups, that one we failed. And when you evaluate where CONCACAF is, I mean, look, sorry to bring this up again, but like Italy not making a World Cup, right? Netherlands not it in Europe, it can happen.
It can.
There are a lot of great European teams. And in that 2018 World Cup, several teams didn't qualify, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we would consider to be stalwarts at the international level.
Yep.
That's not the way that it should have been for the U.S. in CONCACAF. This isn't a region that is flush with talent the way that others are, right? And it's not a region that sets up their qualification structure to leave things to chance. You got to play home and away against every single all 5 other teams in that hex, and you didn't get the job done. And again, we can look at coaching. We can look at Jurgen not being a good coach, Bruce not getting the job done. Michael Bradley and those guys were part of the whole process, and they didn't get the job done. And that's that. I don't want to continue to harp on that, but that's the reality. You know, he has a great, 2017 season, fantastic. And then, but you do that, and then in that same process, you somehow fail to qualify for a World Cup. Right,
and it hammers home that the idea that it was just weak mindset, right? That sort of the weak mindset, and whether it's true or not, it was the impression that people got that it's just
the field was a little wet, Nick. You know, it was they had to change location.
Right.
Trinidad had to play on it. They scored 2 freaking goals.
Right.
You know.
And
anyway,
but it's that mentality thing of if Bradley, and this is what's kind of crazy to look back. If Bradley had said, "I'm turning down the extra money. I'm staying in Europe. I want to get better," and if the U.S. still misses the World Cup, I'm of the opinion that people would say, "Okay, Pulisic and Bradley are the only ones who need to come back because they're the only ones who are pushing themselves to be better. Everyone else can go." But because Bradley had come back, because Bradley had left Europe, he had already been tagged with that idea of, well, you're just not mentally strong enough to handle it. And with the khaki response from a lot of the players across the board, and you see Pulisic looks like he's 2 steps short of like a nervous breakdown after missing the World Cup.
Yeah. Right.
And
right.
So many of the other guys are like, oh, well, yeah, you know, it really stinks. And I think that is where the rage never left after that. Like, that's when the booing, like, we're going to boo you out of the building henceforth, because had he cut the promo afterwards, if he and Josie had said, this will never, ever happen again on our watch, I guarantee it. And I'm going to take ownership because I'm the captain. It's on me. Yeah. It's my failure. The guys did well. I let us down. I'm going to get us back. We're going to go. And you will never see a U.S. men's national team be better than what we're going to be after this. This is Project World Cup from here on out. We're going to kick the crap out of anybody that gets in front of us going forward. If he had cut a promo like that, I don't think it's the same stain. But, you know, it's that generation is going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And they're going to
I will say, I think Bradley has dealt with it a little bit better than his counterpart at Toronto at that time, who seems to think that he's never done anything wrong on or off the soccer field. I think Bradley now does understand that they messed up. Yeah. But I'm with you. Like, in the moment, it still was just
in the moment.
And I think a great response.
No, I think in the moment he made what he thought was the mature, responsible decision, which was to be as the leader. I can't slam anybody. I can't bury the manager. I can't bury people who underperformed.
Right.
I have to be the lighthouse. So I think he tried to be the lighthouse in a scenario where he just didn't need to be the lighthouse. He needed to be the fireball. Yeah. And that's just not happening. But Italy is dealing with mentality now. That's what we're dealing with. We are from a mental standpoint, I don't think we're qualifying for the Euros, and I don't think we're qualifying for the next World Cup.
Well, that's a great point, though, Nick, because, sorry, John, we're derailing, but, you look at European
When has this show ever been on the rails, Bart?
You look at European qualification, and I do not think for 1 second that Portugal is a vastly better team than Italy, right? Mm-hmm. But here they are, qualified already for a Euro. They have won one recently. I mean, obviously Italy did as well, but they kind of, to me, fit that mentality approach very well. Like you keep pointing, it's because they are dedicated, determined, and they understand the goal is to win.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is not play pretty soccer.
Nope.
They can play pretty soccer, but at the end of the day, the goal is to win. It's something that Gareth Southgate needs to figure out real quick because England ain't qualified yet either. So.
Well, yeah, but I'll tell you this: England beat the brakes off of us yesterday, and
yeah. Well,
does that say more about you, or does that say more about them?
They ain't qualified yet, so
they ain't qualified yet. But it's, I think that's where, looking forward, if there's any positive to be taken away from Bradley's career, is I think people can look and say we need a different attitude. Publicly, not just privately, but a different attitude publicly going forward. And I think that's where Bradley can step really effectively into the next stage of his career by going into the U.S. men's national team pyramid and coaching these kids up, saying, look, man, you got to be on fire to get these. It's not all just about being cool as ice. Sometimes you got to turn the heat on and I can tell you how to get there, doing it in Europe, doing it here in MLS, doing it, for the national team, failing at the national team. I can show you what not to do as well as what to do. And to me, if a coach only tells you what to do because of their quote unquote success, there's already a red flag. I need somebody who's a leader who's going to say, hey, let me tell you where I failed as well, because I can help guide you through this minefield, because I'm it's like Virgil in the Inferno. I can show you what not to do. So, and it's, I think that's where he can really be that statesman for U.S. soccer. And which I'm hoping what Buffon does with the Italian national team, which is currently what he's doing. So take that statesman role, man, run with it.
All I'm going to say is, hey, San Marino scored. Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
Yeah, that's Kevin Garnett. Anything is possible.
Exactly.
Anything's possible for a man who's one of the best talents of his generation, playing with a team of other great talents.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Kevin.
All the super teams. Other than nobody getting hurt and seeing Gio Reyna score, what happened last night for you at Geodis?
Well, there weren't a lot of people there. So that is concerning. U.S. Soccer does need to figure themselves out of that.
Well, it ain't a hard figure out. Lower the ticket prices and I mean, cities that they ain't been in before.
Well, right, because you saw what happened with East Hartford, though, and those ticket prices weren't drastic. They weren't cheaper than what happened in Nashville, but you're right. I mean, and you can say, oh, well, Germany's a big-time opponent. Ghana's a good opponent. Like, if you're a U.S. soccer fan, you're aware of who Ghana is. But anyway, that discussion probably could take a whole hour of this show, to be honest.
That sounds like a future episode of Soccer for USP.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably what it'll be. Because you don't see as problematic attendances with the U.S. women's team, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
One, they're good, but like they market themselves, they sell themselves. U.S. soccer has still not done a good job figuring out how to sell the U.S. men's national team. We do realize that they divorced from some, so that there's no more MLS quota, despite what some people on Twitter
SUM, not SOME.
Some, yeah, Soccer United Marketing.
There we go. Yeah.
So they no longer work with them, which I think they're learning how hard it is to gain and garner attention for this sport in this country. But anyway, no, I think the most important thing was you looked able to create a lot of chances against not a great team by any stretch. I think that's the thing that surprised me most was Ghana did not defend, especially particularly well. But it did feel like against Uzbekistan and Oman, scoring was a struggle at points. Creating chances was a struggle at points. And Ghana is a better team than both of those, and you were able to create more chances, put the ball in the back of the net. You can talk about the fact that one was a penalty, one was an indirect free kick, but you still put the ball in the back of the net. You still created chances to put the ball inside the penalty area, which has been, again, something this team has struggled to do under Berhalter throughout his time. So that's a positive.
Okay. Next up will be activity in the Nations League.
Trinidad is confirmed.
Okay, so it is confirmed. Trinidad, November 16th at Q2. Place better be rocking, but we all know about Texas and weekend. So first leg of the quarterfinals on November 16th. Youth national team. Looking at that starting 11 last night for the YNT for their match, it included Caleb Wiley starting, which was
pretty stout 11. Let's be real honest. And then they brought subs off the bench, and John Tolkien, Jack McGlynn, Duncan McGuire, this U23. If they can keep that again, the goal of these friendlies wasn't necessarily to win. We beat Mexico. They still can't beat us.
Right.
Put a beat down on Japan, and that was. We'll talk about that game in itself in a little bit. But the goal of these were just to get the group of U23s that you want to take to the Olympics next summer together. Mm-hmm. And this is a good foundation to start with. This was a good window for them, mostly because they got to train together as an actual U23 team with a U23 coach who seems like he actually knows what he's doing, which is a stark contrast to the last one. Again, Jason Kreis is not a good soccer coach anymore. Sorry, he just isn't. That is the most important thing, though, is you got all these guys together. But the results looked pretty darn good, too.
Here's your starting 11 for those that do not follow the YNT on the 280-character app. Christopher Brady from the Fire was in net. Caleb Wiley, Brian Reynolds wore the C, Johan Gomez, Paxton Aronson, Maximilian Dietz, Benjamin Kremoski, Aiden Morris, Obed Vargas, Indiana Vasilev, Jonathan Tompkinson. And then it was off the bench, Pulskamp, Nathan Harriel, Craig, John Tolkien got 20. Tanner Tessman came in the second half. Gianluca Busio came in, gave you 30. Jack McGlynn came in to give you 30. Gutierrez, McGuire, Kumungo came in and gave you 30. And Esmer Bayraktarovich came in and gave you 30. I mean, good God, man, in a 4-1 friendly.
And what I took from that is Japan was good. They possessed the ball well, they passed, but our counterattacking, our purposeful possession was amazing. I mean, you get 4 goals. That's great. And that, to me, is where the U.S. needs to, where we can be against teams at or above our level, where we don't always get the ball. And this is something Greg does have to adjust with. Is he likes to have the ball all the time. And you're going to be in a lot of situations where you don't. Also, last night, the U.S. was outpossessed and outpassed by Ghana, which was a weird stat to look at this morning when I was going through all that. You have to be intentional and direct with your possession. And when you are, we still have the athletes. This is the U.S. soccer. We're always going to have athletes. You're going to have the athletes who can really hurt defenses. And against Japan, you did. It was good build-up play, but it wasn't always there because Japan presses really high. But once we broke that first line of their press, we were off. And that was the most encouraging thing because we kind of saw us struggle with that against Uruguay in the U20 World Cup, where we did a really good job up until then, and we faced a really good team. And though we played well for the most part, their pressure got to us. We didn't see that against Japan last night, and that was a positive.
And do we not have a women's soccer national team roster drop today as well?
Today, they will be dropping the roster for the friendlies against Colombia, which we still don't have a head coach. So I will hedge my bets and just say that, like, look, these friendlies are more about playing soccer. We'll get to see Linda Caicedo play for Colombia, which is always fun for me. But U.S. women roster drop today. They've got friendlies against Colombia on the 25th and 29th, I believe.
And have you done your research on Hickory FC and the NPSL, sir?
No, I haven't yet, but I did see that there's a Hickory FC now.
And they're playing at Lenore-Rhine.
Yeah, well, hey, listen. That field was built the year before I got there. It's the reason I went to Lenore-Rhine, because a couple of the schools I went to look at, they were cow pastures, and I saw this multi-million-dollar facility with a multi-million-dollar track around it, and actual money poured into it by the guy who started Gold Toe Socks. That sold me. So congrats. Yeah, I like the Moret Sports Athletic Complex getting a more permanent tenant as well.
All right. And so what's next for Soccer for USPOD? You're going to take the hour from the suggested topic from this morning?
We'll do that in the time period between friendlies and nothing. So we'll have, we had the women's friendlies in this, not this week, but next week. Yeah. So after that, we'll probably get into, talking about bigger topics. It's hard when you actually have games to talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, John, I think for me, again, what we saw this window was we're creating more good soccer players. But shockingly, and this is where people on Twitter need to understand, shockingly, our good players still aren't better than the best players in the world. And we don't have those guys yet. And it's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And we're not at the levels of Germany, of Italy, of Netherlands, of England. We don't have those guys. Can we perform at that level some days? Yeah, we can. But we're still not there yet. But we're getting darn close. And that to me is a positive.
He is. And Bam wants to know the thoughts on the NWSL winners getting a cake tin. I think they've actually.
Listen, I've made better projects from Dollar Tree materials. Wow. They are getting a new one.
Yeah,
they are getting a new one. They just prioritize the NWSL Championship and MVP trophy, but that's embarrassing even for it's embarrassing because also the NWSL Championship trophy before this was pathetic. Like, let's be real honest. I don't know. WUSA had a better trophy, but that is, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Nick has probably had kids bring home art projects bigger and more grand.
Oh, I'm sure that the Duchess could do something now that would rival.
Yeah.
Look, the Duchess is stitching her own handbags right now. So
see, yeah, exactly. But hey, $15,000 for all the Wave players. That is nice. So maybe they probably care a little bit more about that than they do a cake tin, serving platter.
So there you go. Bart, as always, thank you, my friend. I know that next Wednesday we will be discussing a lot of reffing down here from Decision Day. So keep your head on a swivel for what's going on, because Dickerson is in the middle for Atlanta and Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And we're looking for
Look, I'm just telling Atlanta fans right now.
Mm-hmm.
Be prepared for disappointment. And I'm not saying we're going to lose. I'm just saying prepare yourself for disappointment. It's a lot easier when you go in that way, because Cincinnati is still very good, even if they rest players. And there's really nothing to gain by winning or losing. To be quiet. Like, that's the frustrating part, John. It's like, what's the worst that happens? We finish 7th as opposed to 6th.
Well, then you figure
but
out.
Hey, I've been told that we're somehow doing better, even though we didn't actually really increase our standing. But good for us.
See, this is why Bart comes in. I let Bart get his shot in, Every single time he comes in, he gets his shot in.
I don't want to be negative. I just like to counterbalance all the positivity when there's nothing to,
To get your shot in.
Yeah.
Just
reality is better than positivity.
Shot. What's your mug today?
Drink coffee, do good.
There you go.
There
Which
you
is
go.
a great tagline for your coffee sponsor.
Yes. Our friends at Kickoff Coffee. So
they can
Bart,
sponsor me if they wanted to. Kickoff Coffee if you want to sponsor me.
Yeah. See, we can do the same kind of a thing. We'll talk to our friends at Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. Bart, we'll see you next week, my friend.
Thank y'all.